I remember the way the light looked that evening, flat and silvery, the kind of light that makes the mountains feel farther away and the world feel smaller. We were 2 days behind schedule by then, after taking a wrong turn down what looked like a dry creek bed, but turned out to be a dead-end canyon. My friend Caleb and I had been hiking in the San Juans for a week, planning to loop back toward the trailhead that morning, but the detour cost us nearly 6 hours of daylight. Our maps were worn, our compass had a bubble in it, and the last of our trail mix was gone. We were running low on everything but stubbornness. That's when we heard it, the rhythmic thump of a helicopter echoing through the valley. We both froze. It sounded distant but distinct, and for the first time in hours, hope sparked like a match inside my chest. "Search and rescue," Caleb said, almost in disbelief. We scrambled up the nearest ridge to get a better view, lungs burning from the thin air and fatigue. The sky to the north had a faint column of smoke rising from it, straight and pale against the evening haze. We stared at each other, both thinking the same thing. Someone had seen us. Someone was out there. We broke camp fast, too fast. I forgot to refill one of our bottles, and Caleb left behind his walking stick. The terrain between us and that smoke wasn't friendly, miles of loose shale and scrub pine, cut by gullies that forced us to zigzag like trapped animals. Still, every few minutes we'd stop and listen, swearing we could hear that helicopter again, or see a flicker of something bright through the trees. Each sound of the wind became an engine. Each flash of sun off rock became a signal mirror. As the sun dropped lower, shadows poured into the valley, turning every rock into something alive and shifting. We stumbled on, driven by hunger and hope. My pack felt twice as heavy. My tongue felt thick and dry. Caleb kept muttering under his breath, words I couldn't quite catch, probably names, maybe prayers. The smoke seemed closer each time we crested a ridge, but never close enough to smell. By the time the first stars appeared, we were nearly spent. Our water was gone, and our legs trembled with every step. We decided to keep moving through the night, guided by that faint glow on the horizon. It didn't matter that it could be miles away. We had to believe it was rescue. We had to believe that sound meant something, that someone would see our headlamps or hear us shouting across the cold dark. That belief carried us deeper into the wilderness, long after reason told us to stop. We walked through the night, our world reduced to the pale cones of our headlamps and the steady crunch of boots on gravel. The air grew colder, thinner and quiet in that eerie way the backcountry gets after midnight. No insects, no wind, just the hollow sound of your own breath. Caleb's knee had started bothering him hours earlier, and every so often he'd stop and brace himself on a rock, breathing through clenched teeth. I wanted to tell him to rest, but neither of us could stand the idea of stopping short of that smoke. It had become more than a goal. It was a promise, a lifeline. Around 3 a.m, we reached the edge of a broad basin. The trees opened up into a stretch of grass and stone, and the stars above looked impossibly close. Down in the low ground, faint orange light flickered. "There," I whispered, though he could already see it. We smiled like men seeing home after a long exile. I could almost hear the chatter of radios, see rescuers by a fire, waiting for the dawn. That thought gave us just enough strength to descend. It took another hour to reach the bottom. The ground grew soft with ash, and the smell of smoke thickened the air. We were sure now, it had to be a signal fire. "They must have set it to mark a pickup zone," Caleb said, his voice cracking. We called out, once, twice, 3 times. Our voices bouncing across the basin, answered only by the wind. Still, the glow beckoned us onward, so we pushed harder, stumbling through brush that snagged our clothes and tore at our legs. When we finally broke into the clearing, our hearts sank. There was no campsite, no rescuers, no gear. The light came from a controlled burn. A line of small, managed fires creeping through the forest floor. Tended not by search teams, but by distant workers we couldn't even see. The chopper we'd heard must have been part of the operation earlier in the day. It wasn't meant for us. It never had been. Caleb dropped to his knees in the ash, silent, while I just stood there, staring, trying to make sense of it. The wind shifted, and smoke rolled through, stinging our eyes and throats. I think that was when it truly hit us. No one was coming. We weren't lost to anyone but ourselves. The realization felt heavier than my pack. Heavier than the hunger, or the thirst, or the endless miles behind us. For a long time, neither of us spoke. When we finally did, it was only to agree that we'd rest until dawn. We found a spot upwind from the burn and sat back to back, too exhausted to eat, too stubborn to despair completely. The faint crackle of the fire line became our lullaby, steady and indifferent. Above us, the stars didn't care, but they watched all the same, cold and bright over two tiny figures trying to find their way home. Morning came slow, grey, and bitter cold. I woke to the sound of Caleb shifting beside me, the faint rattle of his canteen. Empty. My throat felt like sandpaper, and every muscle in my body ached as if I'd been carrying the mountains themselves. The smoke from the burn still hung low, a pale haze that blurred the tree line and painted everything in shades of ash. For a long moment, I just sat there, watching the light creep across the basin, trying to summon the will to move. Caleb was already sitting up, staring at the faint trail the fire crews must have used the day before. "We follow it," he said quietly. His voice had changed overnight, lower, steadier somehow. The kind of voice that belongs to someone who's accepted something hard. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what we were following anymore. The fire line stretched east, towards the distant ridges that blocked the horizon. If luck was with us, it would lead to a service road or at least a stream. If not, well, we hadn't had much luck so far. We packed in silence. My pack felt lighter now, mostly because there was so little left inside. No food except a handful of crushed crackers. No water. Our map, folded and refolded too many times, was soft as cloth. I remember noticing the smell of burnt pine resin as we started walking, the sharp, sweet scent that only comes after fire. Every step kicked up grey dust that clung to our boots and skin. The world had gone quiet again, save for the crunch of our footsteps and the occasional moan of a far-off wind. By mid-morning, the haze had thinned, and I could see where the fire crews had cut a path, clear lines through the brush, flagging tape fluttering from branches. It was faint comfort, but it was something human. We kept our eyes open for signs of water, a trickle, a green patch, anything. Around noon, I spotted a scatter of animal tracks, deer, maybe elk, pressed deep into the soft ash. They were headed north. "Animals know where to drink," I said, and for once Caleb didn't argue. The next couple of hours blurred together. We followed those tracks through a shallow draw, our shadows stretching long behind us. When we finally heard the sound of water, a faint, gurgling whisper at first, it almost didn't seem real. We quickened our pace, half stumbling, half running, until we reached a narrow stream winding between two charred logs. It was barely a trickle, but it was enough. We dropped to our knees and drank greedily, not caring about grit or temperature. It tasted like life itself. We filled what bottles we had and sat there for a while, letting the cold seep into our bones, too drained to speak. Above us, the sky was clearing, bright blue at the edges, soft and endless. For the first time in 2 days, I let myself breathe without fear. But hope, I'd learned, is a fragile thing. And out there, miles from the nearest road, it doesn't take much to shatter it again. We followed that stream for hours, tracing its silver ribbon down through the valleys as it widened, then narrowed again among the rocks. The sun climbed high, baking the slopes until the air shimmered, and the smell of scorched pine still lingered from the burn. Every now and then, we'd find a footprint, a scrap of tire tread in the dust, or a sawn stump, signs that people had once been there. Those little hints of civilization became our compass. Caleb said if we just kept moving downstream, it had to lead somewhere. Water always does. By mid-afternoon, we reached a bend where the stream met a wide swath of open land. The ground was scored with deep ruts, the kind left by heavy trucks. At first, I thought we'd stumbled onto an old logging road. But as we got closer, the low drone of engines drifted across the distance. Caleb's head snapped up. "You hear that?" he asked, voice trembling between exhaustion and disbelief. I nodded. It wasn't a helicopter this time. It was steady, mechanical, unmistakably human. We scrambled toward the sound, slipping in the dust, pushing through brambles that tore at our arms. The road widened into a clearing, filled with equipment, bulldozers, a tanker truck, and rows of felled logs stacked neatly like the bones of a giant. 2 men in orange vests stood near one of the machines, talking. For a long second, I couldn't move. It was the kind of ordinary sight that looked miraculous to us. 2 half-starved hikers stumbling out of the woods. When we called out, the men turned, startled. Their expressions shifted from confusion to concern as they jogged toward us. I could barely get the words out, something about being lost, running low, following smoke. They handed us water, radioed for someone down the road, and told us we were almost 20 miles off the main trail. 20 miles. I remember laughing when I heard it, a dry, broken sound that didn't quite feel like mine. They sat us on the tailgate of a pickup and gave us sandwiches from a cooler. I don't think I've ever tasted anything better. One of them mentioned the controlled burn we'd seen. It had been set 3 valleys over to reduce fire risk. The helicopter we'd heard wasn't a rescue craft at all, just part of the operation ferrying supplies. "You're lucky you didn't wander into the wrong section," he said. "They were burning pretty hot yesterday." Caleb and I exchanged a look, something between gratitude and quiet disbelief. We were safe, yes, but the realization hit hard. All that desperate hope, all that chasing smoke and sound, had been for nothing more than a misunderstanding of distance and luck. Still, as I sat there with the sun warming my face and the steady hum of machinery in the background, I couldn't feel bitter. The relief was too pure, too heavy to leave room for anything else. For the first time in days, we didn't need to keep walking. The crew drove us out that evening, winding along a rough dirt road that twisted through the burned hills. I remember leaning my head against the window, watching the forest slip by. Blackened trunks, streaks of gold light breaking through the smoke. Everything looked both ruined and reborn. Caleb sat quietly beside me, holding the paper cup of coffee one of the loggers had given him, his hands still trembling slightly from fatigue. Neither of us spoke for a long time. There wasn't much left to say. When we finally reached the ranger station, the setting sun had turned the whole sky a deep, bruised orange. The rangers checked us over, took down our route, and offered a warm meal and cots in the back room. I remember the smell of chili simmering on the stove. It filled that cabin like the scent of home itself. We ate slowly, methodically, as though afraid the food might vanish if we weren't careful. Later, after Caleb fell asleep, I stepped outside. The air was cooler, and the first stars were winking out above the dark ridgeline. I could still see faint plumes of smoke rising in the distance from the controlled burn. Those columns that had once looked like rescue flares now seemed more like reminders. Steady, practical, indifferent to the drama they'd caused in our minds. Out there, nothing was personal. The forest burns, grows back, burns again. The mountains don't care who loses their way among them. But standing there, I also realized something else. We'd made it not because of luck or rescue, but because we refused to give up on each other. We'd made the wrong turns, trusted the wrong sounds, but we'd kept walking. There's a kind of strength that only comes when there's no other choice. That's what survival really is. Putting one foot in front of the other, even when every step feels pointless. When dawn came, the ranger offered us a ride to town. As the truck climbed out of the valley, I turned to look back one last time. The smoke was almost gone now, replaced by soft mist curling over the hills. It struck me then how small our struggle must have seemed from above. Two tiny figures lost in a sea of rock and pine, chasing illusions in the haze. Caleb caught me staring and gave a tired smile. "Guess it wasn't rescue after all," he said. "No," I replied, "but it got us moving." He nodded, understanding more than the words said. Sometimes hope lies, but it also saves you. Sometimes a false signal is still the reason you make it out alive. The mountains faded behind us, and the road ahead wound on, bright and endless under the rising sun.